We
Well,
are live.
hello. Hello, and welcome to the Waking Up Spiritually podcast. We're so thrilled to have you here with us with a really special guest today. I'm Wendy Rose Williams, one of your co hosts, along with Greg Kirk. And the purpose of Waking Up Spiritually is just to help support you in what can be very discombobulating, as the three of us were talking off air before we got on. And we just want to provide some support for that when perhaps your worldview really gets shaken up and really changes. I am a past life energy healer. I help people resolve issues such as anxiety, depression, chronic pain, both physical and emotional. And my website is wendyrosewilliams.com. And I'll turn it over to Greg to introduce himself and the wonderful things that he does. And then we'll introduce our speaker for today, our guest.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm Gregg Kirk, and I can be found at greggkirk.com. And are you seeing me okay? Because I'm not seeing me for some reason.
Yes.
All right, there we go.
Everything's looking normal, Greg. Everything's looking great.
I am an energy healer, energy worker too. I do in-person and remote sessions. And you can contact me through my website, Gregg Kirk, that's spelled GREGGKIRK.com. I also do weekly Sunday online group healing circles. And in the Connecticut area, I do in-person fire circles monthly. So reach out to me, click the book an appointment link, or click the events tab to see what's going on for events in your area or online. But today, okay, so I'm going to pull the deck up, and Wendy, you can get started introducing our special guest today.
Yes, absolutely. So today's a really fun day for me because Robert Snow has written one of my favorite books of all time, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic. And I'm really thrilled that he took the time to be with us today. I think you're going to enjoy hearing a very different story that's got some pretty incredible research to it of what occurred for Bob as he set out to disprove reincarnation. So you can see why that's particularly interesting to me, since I came to the world of past life regression later. And not expecting this journey at all, but it's just being so much up my alley. So let's go to the next slide, Greg. And for those of you who are listening, you're also welcome to go to our website or to our YouTube channel. Our website is wakingupspiritually.com, and there you're able to see this podcast as a visual, as a PowerPoint. So Robert Snow served for 38 years in the Indianapolis Police Department, retiring in 2007 with the rank of police captain. And please correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, because Greg, our pictures are like right over the intro right now in how my PowerPoint is appearing. So I'm like making up every second word here. And while at the police department, he served in such capacities as the chief of detectives and commander of the homicide branch. Robert Snow has also been a publishing writer for over 30 years. He's had over 100 articles and short stories published in such magazines as Playboy, Reader's Digest, The National Enquirer, The Writer, Police, The Saint Detective Magazine, and others. He's also had almost 20 books published. Almost all of Captain Snow's published works were written so readers could use his knowledge of law enforcement to better protect themselves and their loved ones. His books are available on Amazon, and a couple of the titles are Family Abuse, Tough Solutions to Stop the Violence, Complete Guide to Personal and Home Safety, What You Need to Know, and Finding Runaways and Missing Adults When No One Else is Looking. So imagine this being your world. Imagine this being your background. Imagine this being your whole life and worldview. And then all of a sudden, some very, very different experiences from when Bob was challenged to go have a past life regression. Bob, can you pick it up from there and just tell us what happened from there and what led to writing a Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic?
Yeah, before this, I wrote this book. Of course, all the books I had written, all the articles and short stories were all about police work, which is what I did for a living. But to be a writer, you also had to be a reader. You just can't write. You also have to read. You have to read from all fields, not just your own field, because if you read from all fields, you can see if a writer has really handled something really well, you want to analyze it and see what he or she did so you can do it yourself. And conversely, if they do something terrible, if it's a terrible writing, you want to see what they did so you don't do that. Well, part of my so I used to read. I read a lot in my in the during my time. When I was a writer, I read a lot. One of the books I read one time was by Dr. Raymond Moody. The book was called Coming Back. I seen the blurb for it. It looked kind of interesting. What happened? Dr. Moody had previously done a lot of research on near-death experiences, and he had a friend who was a psychologist who did past life regression therapy, and he didn't really know much about it, and she persuaded him to undergo some past life regression. So he did, and he wrote a book about it. He talks about, and it was a really well written book, very interesting. He talks about where she hypnotized and he went back to nine supposed past lives, and he talks about them. And like I said, it's a very well written book. But at the very end, he kind of hedges, I don't know what this is. I don't know if this is true or just my imagination. And that's kind of the way I felt about it after I read the book. And I didn't think too much about it, and I went on to other reading. Well, a few months later, I was at a Christmas party, and there was a woman there. She was a police detective, but also a practicing psychologist. And I've known her for years, and her and I making small chit chat talk. We talk about movies we'd seen, and then we start talking about books we read. And I remember this book, and I mentioned it to her, and she wanted to know what I thought about it. It was kind of late in the party, and I had a bit to drink. And I kind of made fun of it because at that time, I really thought the idea of reincarnation was foolishness. It was just wishful thinking of people who didn't want to take the blame for their own problems in this life, but better, that I made things bad in this life because of a past life type thing. And again, I thought it was all foolish. It was all foolish and wishful thinking. And I didn't realize at the time that the psychologist I was talking to used past life regression in hers. And I really kind of made fun of it. So much so, I think she got a little bit irritated with me and dared me. She said, well, if you think it's foolish, why don't you try it and see it? And at first I said, no, I'm not doing that. Then it's got to the point, oh, you're scared. No, you don't want to ask a man if he's scared. Of course you're going to say you're scared. And so eventually, again, I said, okay, I'd do it. So she gave me the name of a friend of hers who did past regression. You go do a session with her, then come back and tell me what you think. So anyway, so the next day, after the party, I woke up and a lot more sober and clear-headed, and I wasn't going to do this. I thought this is just stupid. Nothing's going to happen. At the time, I didn't really think I could even be hypnotized, so I just didn't pay attention. I said I'm not going to do it. But then it seemed like every day I walked down the hallway, there she'd be. Now, before this, I swear I didn't run into her once a month at most. It seemed like almost every day I'd run into her, and she'd say, "Well, have you made the appointment yet?" And I'd always make some kind of little flimsy excuse. Well, I'm going to, but I had 3 meetings today and this kind of thing. But I just kept running to her. And it got it got to the point you'd see her, I'd try and head down a stairway to get away from her. And at the last, I thought, boy, this is stupid. You can't be, this is really stupid. You can't be doing this. I was really kind of irritated about it too. So I finally called her friend, was a Dr. Mary Ellen Griffith, was the name she gave me, and made an appointment. And I thought, what I'll do, I'll go there. I'll cooperate 100%, and I'll show that this is foolish. Nothing's going to happen. There's no past lives. They're not going to be able to take me back to past lives. It's not true. So anyway, so I showed up, and I even brought my own tape recorder along because I wanted to record this so I could show the psychologist later on. Say, see, look, now listen to this. Nothing happened. It's just weak-minded people who are being fooled by the psychologist. So anyway, so I went to the office and saw Dr. Griffith, a very nice lady, very, very pleasant, nice lady. Had kind of a funny sing-songy voice, very pleasant sing-songy voice. And she walked me in, and she asked me, what I needed. And I told her I was just interested in past life regression and I'd like to try it. And she didn't say anything wrong with that. So she said, okay, sit down. So we sit down and we talked for a bit. And finally she said, okay, you ready to start? I said, well, sure enough. I thought this is foolish. I'm wasting an hour, but I thought, well, now I can go back to the psychologist and say, see, I told you so. So anyway, she said, okay, now close your eyes. Says, I want you to look. Can you see a balloon? Imagine you can see a balloon. Well, actually, where I was sitting on the couch, the light was coming in from my right, and then I could see a round purple blob on but I knew all it was the light coming through the window. And I said, yeah, I see a purple balloon. Again, I'm trying to cooperate. I'm going to do everything I can. I didn't want her to think I was resisting because then that wouldn't work. But I wanted to cooperate and show that I had tried, but nothing had happened. So anyway, she said, okay. Said, now imagine yourself climbing into the balloon. Okay. So okay, I'm going along. I'm trying to imagine it. Said, okay. Now, she says, now imagine the balloon rising up. So I'm doing. So even when I'm looking, and it's funny, down at the bottom of my eyelids, it looked like little points of light. And I thought, nah, this is just glare off the floor is all it is. So I didn't really pay much attention. So anyway, she said, okay. She said, now we're flying along the balloon and I'm trying to imagine that. She said, now, she said, up and over your head, there's a control that we can land. Reach up and pull the control and land the balloon. Now we must went through this about a dozen times or more because nothing happened. Again, I'm thinking this is her daydream, not mine. I wasn't going to imagine something that wasn't really, just for her. And we must have went through at least a dozen or more times. And she was nice about it. I mean, she kept pull the handle. I said, I am. She said, where are you landing? I said, it's not. Because again, this wasn't my daydream. So we went on for this for a while. And finally she said, okay. She said, obviously these are not places you want to stop. She said, now see if you can imagine a mountain in your mind. Now I'd been sitting there probably 10, 15 minutes and I was really getting kind of tired sitting there. And in my mind, I could see, I think my mind was getting weak because I was tired because I could see a mountain. That wasn't, a sharp picture mountain, but I can imagine a mountain. She said, okay, now take the balloon and land on the mountain. So I'd imagine that. And I could imagine, I could feel and see myself land on the mountain. And again, I'm trying to be cooperative and everything. Says, what do you see? And it's funny, when I landed by there, I could see what looked like a log cabin. Except the interesting part where the logs are going vertical rather than horizontal, which one of my readers later told me that's the French way of building a log cabin. She says, okay. She says, go inside. What do you see? I didn't see anything. Again, this is her daydream. I see anything. She said, okay. She said, imagine it's light and the place is filled with food. She said, fill yourself, but enjoy yourself. So I'm trying to do that. So finally she said, okay, now we'll leave the cabin. So we're going to walk down to the valley. I said, there's 12 steps. Now I'm going to count the steps. I want you to walk down the steps into the valley. Can you imagine that? Okie dokie. I'm still trying to be nice and cooperative. So she starts counting. And to me, it was funny because she started this 12, then each number be longer, 11, it's like when he sings you stage hypnotist. I'm trying not to laugh, but I think it's so silly. And she's going 8, 7, 6. I'm counting steps down. Funny, when she got to 1, something happened, really bizarre. All of a sudden I was in a valley. I don't mean I was imagining I was in a valley. I was daydreaming I was in a valley. I was in a valley. I mean, I was in a valley. It was clear as true life clear. I could look and see leaves on the bushes next to me. I could see the veins in the leaves. Now I knew what this was. I may have thought I was strong enough not to be hypnotized. I knew what this was. I knew I wasn't really in a valley because I could still feel the cow turn under me, and I could hear noises outside the window. But at the same moment, I was in a valley. I mean, in a very realistic valley. I could feel a breeze. The funny thing, I could feel a breeze in my face. I could see the leaves moving, but I just assumed it was the air conditioning in the office. And so anyway, I'm walking along in this valley, and she said, okay, look down, describe yourself. And I looked down and I could see I had real dirty feet, hairy legs, and I was wearing some kind of dirty matted fur. In my left hand, I was carrying what looked like a tree limb. I didn't realize it till I listened later in my tape. She had told me, I want you to go back to the very first life. I didn't know at the moment that you lived on Earth. Go back to the very first existence you had on Earth. At the time, I don't remember her saying that, but I listened to my tape. She had said that. And I knew what it was. I knew what a caveman looked like. And I've seen that movies and TV programs. And again, I thought this is just a hypnosis. That's all it is. Yeah, you're not as strong as you thought. You were hypnotized, bottom line. But at the same time, tell you the truth, it was kind of fun. It's kind of like one of those, you ever been, go down a virtual reality ride at an amusement park. Now it looks awful real, looks very real, but it isn't real. It's just special effects. And I figured that's what this was. It's just special effects. But then suddenly I also started realizing things. Now, Bob Snow didn't realize things, but what our body I was in knew things. And all of a sudden, without knowing I was going to say it, I said, I live here. I live in a cave up on the hill. Now, the person body I was in knew this. And again, I started speaking. I didn't know I was going to say that. It kind of caught me by surprise. Dr. Griffith said, okay. Said, now go to your home. Now, I didn't walk there, just like 2 or 3 seconds of gray fog. And I was at the entrance to a cave. Then now the really bizarre things, I started to walk in and I had this awful, awful smell. This was not a very hygienic person. Whoever lived this place was not hygienic. I could tell, I could smell, and I thought this is, again, I'm thinking, boy, this is really bizarre. How could, where's the smell coming from? It was really a smell of a place been lived in without being cleaned for years. I had this terrible smell. So anyway, I described everything, Dr. Griffith and all. And she said, okay, now I want you to go to your death. She says, go to your death and tell me what you see. And again, it was just 3 or 4 seconds of gray fog. And all the next thing I know, I'm not in the body anymore. I'm floating above it. And I can see it's a little skinny man laying on the floor of this cave. And he's just shivering and coughing and shaking. I can see he's really, really sick. So Dr. Griffith, we went through this a while and I described what I saw to her. Again, this whole thing to me is just fascinating. I know it's not real, but it looked so real. It was so real. I could see anything. It was just so realistic. I mean, I could see everything clear. And anyway, she said, all right, I'll go out the cave and look up. Do you see a light? I said, no, I'll go out the cave, look up. And sure enough, there's a big light over the valley. She said, okay, now I need you to go to the light. But she said, before you go, says, somebody said, what did this life mean to you? What was the point? And again, I didn't know I was going to say this. I just blurted out. I told her my life that I was supposed to experience loneliness. I didn't have anyone in this life. I had no one but me. She said, okay. She said, I go into the light. It says, now I want you to go to a life when you did have someone. So I go and into the light, and there's again about 4 or 5 seconds of gray fog. And next thing I see, at first it's kind of funny because when the next scene came in, it wasn't clear. I know people who aren't old enough to realize in the movie theaters, a lot of times you'd get a movie that wasn't clear. It'd be all blurry, and it'd take a few moments from adjust it, and it'd click into clear, into becoming clear. That's what this was like. But for a full 4 or 5 seconds, everything's really blurry. I can see I'm on a city street, but I can't see everything real clear. And suddenly, like in the movie theaters used to be, all of a sudden they click and everything is clear. And I could see I was walking down a street, and funny thing, I could feel the sun beating down on me. Now I'm sitting in a closed office, but I could feel the sun beating down as I walk along this city street. As I look, I can see it's probably the late 19th century because they have gas lights and there's horse-drawn. I didn't see any automobiles. It was all horse-drawn carriages pulling down the street. So anyway, Dr. Griffith asked me to describe myself, and I looked down to where I was wearing a nice suit and pants, and I had a cane. But I said, it's not a cane because I'm old. It's a fancy walking stick. She said, okay. So I described the scene to her, and she said, okay, what are you going to do? So I'm going to meet someone. She said, okay, who are you going to meet? I said, it's a woman. She said, okay, now you met the woman. Where are you going? And I told her, well, we were going to an outdoor cafe. So this is me and the woman go to an outdoor cave. We sit down. She said, what do you order? She said, well, I remember I told her she ordered some kind of special water. I ordered a glass of wine. So we talked about this for a while and described. Dr. Griffith said, okay, now go 5 years ahead. What do you see? So again, there's 4 or 5 seconds of kind of a gray fog. And next time I'm in the hallway in an apartment, I'm arguing with the woman. And I'm just having this real vigorous argument with her. And then I turn around and just walk away. And I walk into the door, and I'm in an artist studio. It's a huge room. It's got, when I walk in, on one side is all windows. Overhead are skylights, and the walls are just covered with dozens of paintings. And again, I didn't know who it is. Bob Snow didn't know, but the person by us in knew that this is where they worked, that they were a painter. And so anyway, I described it all to her and everything. She said, okay. So now go 5 years ahead. So I go 5 years. I'm at a party, and it's I don't know what the party's about, but everybody's congratulating, everybody's shaking my hand, congratulating me and pat me on the back. So I assume I'm the guest of honor at this party. And so again, I didn't know what it was, but I could feel what this person was feeling. And I could tell this is one of the happiest moments of his life, that he was really, really happy. So anyway, after we talked about it for a while, Dr. said, okay, move 5 more years. But I didn't. People really seem to think that if you're being hypnotized, that you're completely under control of the hypnotist. And that's not really true. You're really in control, because Dr. Griff kept saying, okay, Bob, go 5 years. But I didn't want to, because if you think about it, how many times in your life do you really experience true happiness? How often? not that much, not very much. And I was really enjoying this. I mean, this was really, it was a great feeling. I said, okay. He says, come on now. He says, "Okay, go ahead." She said, okay. So I finally went. She said, I'm gonna go 5 years. And then I'm in a huge, large garden, and I'm just walking along, and I'm describing the garden to Dr. Griffith and talking about, talking about things. She said, okay. Said, now I want you to go to your death. Said, I want you to go to your death and tell me what you see. But so I see myself laying on a bed, and then all of a sudden my soul passes out of my body. Now everybody's seen TV on this movie TV. You know the ghost passes out of your body, and so I saw myself pass out of the body and go through the roof of this building I was in. And again, this is like all movies and TVs. Everybody's seen this. But finally, when I got up in the building, I could see I was over a large city, not a large, a huge city. There were lights for the horizon every direction. I was over a huge, huge city. And Dr. Greer said, okay, says, what did you regret? What did you regret about this life? I said, I regretted that we didn't have children because my wife couldn't have children. She said, okay. So now go, I want you to go into the light, see a light. And sure enough, there was a light overhead, but I didn't. Again, like I said, you're not really under control of the hypnotist as they think. Instead, I saw myself flying through some woods. And I could tell it appeared to be a later fall night because it was cold and brisk out, but the trees still had leaves on them. So that at the next moment, I see myself, I'm on the second or third story of this big mansion. I'm looking in the window. There's a window, there's nobody in the room, but there's a big fire in the fireplace. And over the fireplace is a still life painting. And I told Dr. Griffith, I wanted to see one of my paintings before I left. Before I left this time, I wanted to see one of my paintings. So, so anyway, I described the painting to her. It was a still life and it had a fruit and a bottle and a big sun behind it. So anyway, so finally she said, okay, now I need you to go into the light. So I want you to go to a life when you were a woman. And I almost laughed and I thought, yeah, that's going to happen. Yeah. Well, it did. Anyway, so again, there's 5 or 6 seconds of gray fog. And all of a sudden I'm standing in the woods, but it's not the woods where the caveman was. This was all flat woods. The trees were different. I look down, I can see him in a woman's body. Again, I'm thinking, boy, this is some hypnosis. This is really bizarre. So anyway, Dr. Griffith asked me to describe the area to her, and I do. And we talk about what I am. I told her that what I am at the moment. I'm standing in front of what looks like as an altar. It's a round circular building with pillars all around. There's a big altar in the middle. And again, I don't know who this person is, but the person by him in knows everything that's going on. And told Dr. Griffith, said, this is where I work. Myself and other women, we tell other girls, we bring things down to the altar. We work here. And she said, okay, and describe your job and what you do. And I told her, well, said we have to be pretty, you have to be a virgin, you have to, obey all the commands of the people that live here and all that. So I talked about it. She says, where are you at? Where are you at? Do you know what country you're in? And again, before I knew what I was going to say, all of a sudden I said Greece. I had no idea why I said that. So anyway, she said, okay, go for 5 years ahead. And where are you at? So the next scene, I come out of the gray fog. I'm in a wagon. It's being pulled by a couple of oxen. And I'm sitting next to her and I look down and there's a little girl sitting to my right. Now the person's body I was in knew this was her daughter. But the funny thing is I recognize her from my present life. It was my stepdaughter, but it wasn't at that time when I had the regression, she was a teenager. But this little girl was the same, but my stepdaughter with the same age of what she was when my wife and I got married. So anyway, and I looked to my left, there's an older man driving the cart. And Dr. Griffith asked me about what's going on. I said, well, because I got pregnant, obviously I wasn't a virgin any longer. I couldn't stay at the temple. So they gave me to this old man. They gave me to the old man. So he takes us to this farm, but he dies real soon afterwards. And I'm on my own again with the daughter. What I do though is I take her back to the temple where I work and give her to him. And I'm trying to convince myself. I'm really talking 50 miles an hour, Dr. Griffith, about how this is a good thing, how she'll have a home, she'll have a place she belongs. But in my mind, I knew what I was doing, and I was abandoning her because it'd be a lot easier for me to get along without a little girl hanging around. And I felt this tremendous guilt. And it was just silly because I could feel this guilt just bearing down on me like a gigantic load on my chest, that what I was doing was abandoning my daughter. So anyway, So I left my daughter there and I went to she asked where I went to, and I told her I went to this village by a big body of water. And anyway, she finally described my death, and I drowned because I could taste salt water at the last moment. I could taste salt water. So anyway, Dr. Griffith finally said, all right, I want you to go into the light. And I really, really wanted to, because the whole time I was there, I felt this terrible guilt. And I remember thinking how silly that was, because this is all make believe. There's no real guilt. But I felt this terrible guilt about betting my daughter. So anyway, she said, finally, Dr. Griffith said, okay, I want you to go into the life you were before you were Bob Snow. You go to your most recent past life before this one. So again, there's 5 or 6 seconds of gray fog. And all of a sudden, I realize I'm back in the painter's body again. But I'm in my studio now and I'm painting a portrait. But interesting enough, the person I'm painting is a hunchback woman. And I thought at the moment about how strange this was. But I'm just about finished with the portrait. And I can see, the thing is, the vision was so clear, I could see every brush stroke, every single brush stroke in the painting. And I just finished it. And I told Dr. Griffith, I'm doing a portrait. I hate painting portraits. I hate it but I need the money. I just hate painting portraits, but I really need the money. And I could feel this desperate need for this person for money. So anyway, we talked about it a while. She want to go to the next scene. I go to another scene where I'm having a real big argument with someone about lighting for my painting is on display somewhere, but I don't think the lighting's right. She said, okay, went to that. Then the next one, she said, go another 5 years. And I'm in a garden. I hear piano music coming to my house. And I walk into the house and my wife is playing a piano for friends. And we talked about it for a while. And Dr. Griff said, okay, go 5 years. Now, but then in between, before I could get the next scene, all of a sudden I had this terrible, terrible feeling of sadness. And I said, Dr. Griffith, she died of a blood clot. The doctor said she had a blood clot. Now, I had no idea who I was talking about, but I just know whoever it was a woman who was extremely important to this man, to the artist. It was extremely important because I almost felt like I was going to cry. I said she died of a blood clot. Well, before I could go into the next scene, the recorder I brought along clicked off, and I opened my eyes, and it was over. Now I'm really kind of flustered because I had gone there thinking this is all foolish and silly, and I'd been babbling along for the last half hour or 40 minutes, and I didn't know what to say. Dr. Griffith was asking me, he said, well, could you see how these scenes apply to your life now? And at the moment, I really couldn't. I was too flustered, but not because of what I'd said and did, but because of the clarity. The visions were so clear. I mean, again, if I looked at the painting of the hunchback woman, I could see every single brush stroke. And I was really flustered. So basically, I don't forget what I told her, mumble something. And I really wanted to get out of there. I had to think. I had to get out of there and think. So anyway, I got out of there and I sat in my car and thought for a while. And I just couldn't come up with any explanation. The only thing I could think of, these are just bits and pieces of memory from my subconscious mind that I had brought up, reordered them into a story. I mean, I know these, I was convinced these weren't real memories. Again, they were just movies I'd seen, books I'd read, TV programs that I had brought up, and then I'd reorder them into a story. And I said, that's all it is, Bob, just forget about it. But that's easy to say, but I could not stop thinking about this stuff. I mean, for the next week or two, I'd think about it 100 times a day at least. And if the funny thing is, for the first couple of years after the regression, if I closed my eyes, I could still see the scenes clearly. I could still see the painting with every brush stroke in it. And it really started to bug me because I couldn't stop thinking about it constantly. Now, I've been a police officer for a lot of years, and I know people with really deep obsessions seldom turns out well for them. It really doesn't. Deep obsessions very seldom turn out well. And I thought, Bob, you got to do something. You got to do something because I could not stop thinking about it. I just I thought about it constantly. So I finally say, well, what you need to do, Bob, is find something. Find one of these two paintings, the Hunchback Woman portrait or the still life. If you could find them, then you'd know where this come from. Like, oh yeah, I saw that, 2 or 3 years ago at an art exhibit, so and so. Then you realize you read the portrait, you read the bio of the artist and everything, and that's where you know this stuff. I just figured that's all I had to do. I just had to find them. So I thought, well, how do you do that? And now they're saying this was pre-internet days. So you just couldn't put Hunchback Woman portrait into a search engine and find it. And these days you had to go to the library and pull books off the shelf to do research. A lot of people, younger people might have a hard time understanding that, but there was no internet, so it was a little harder. So what I decided to do,
I went down to the Indianapolis Public Library on my lunch hour and started going through their art collection, started looking through their books. I figured the paintings had to be, I'm not a big art aficionado or anything, so I don't know that much about art. So I figured these two paintings had to be fairly well known, very famous, or I wouldn't know about them. So I thought if I start thumbing through their art books, I'll find one of these two. Then I'll know where the artist was, and I'll realize where I saw them. And again, it'll show it was just part of subconscious memories brought back up and regurgitated and put into a story. So anyway, but the really bad thing I didn't realize that the public library had hundreds of art books. It took me almost 3 months to go through all the books. Now I went through every book there in the library, every art book, but didn't find either one of them. Now that really started bugging me because I knew that they couldn't be that obscure. I would never known about them. And the point is that both of them are so clear in my memory. I knew they had to be real paintings. So what I did, finally, I started visiting some books. I figured, well, maybe I'll visit some bookstores and check their art books. They might have more recent art books in the library. So I actually trained, I went back and checked a whole bunch of bookstores. Borders Bookstore, B. Dalton. Those are all gone now, but the old bookstores at this time. And I started checking them all and still didn't find them. So then I started visiting some art galleries. I thought, well, if I went there and talked to art gallery owners, described the paintings, they'd know where they were. But again, this was pre-internet days. And in those days, there was no real central list of paintings. You had to basically know. Now, if it's a real famous painting, you want a Van Gogh or, something like that, a Monet, yeah, you could find them. They're pretty obvious where they're at. But you wanted a little more obscure. In those days, it wasn't easy to find. There was no central listings, I found out.
What year was this, Bob?
Yeah.
What year was this?
In 1992.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, there was no internet, so it made it a lot harder to find things. Finally, what really got me going this thing was that I'd been a detective for a long time. And I thought when I started out, this would be an easy case. I'll just find one of these paintings, I'll solve it, no problem. Well, the thing got to be a challenge of my detective skills because after going through all the books in the library and visiting bookstores, talking to art gallery owners, I still hadn't found anything. So I even went back and visited Dr. Griffith for another regression. I thought, well, if I go back, maybe I can find more about the artist. Then I'll realize where I got the information from. So I went back to Griffith and had another really interesting session, but nothing involved the artist. Every time she tried to get me to go to the artist's life, nothing had happened. And I had some interesting other lives, interesting other past lives, but nothing about the artist. And she finally said, well, you know everything you need to know. At the moment, I didn't think that was so, but it actually turned out to be so. So finally, I wasn't ready to give up. So I visited a New Age bookstore in Indianapolis. I thought maybe I need to read up on what happened, about past life regression therapy and see if I can find out what happened. Maybe that would help explain it. And so I went there and bought several books on past life regression therapy. One of the books was kind of interesting. It had a little script at the back for self-hypnosis. Now, this sounds fun, but boy, that's a lot harder to do than you think, But it was like Dr. Griffith. She was very visual. She wanted you to describe things very much. Well, this had the same kind of script. So I tried it, and I probably tried it a dozen times. Only twice I could feel myself going into the same state I was in Dr. Griffith's office, but it only lasted for just maybe 3 or 4 seconds. Both times I could see the number 1917. Both times I saw the number 1917, then it clicked back out. Well, I was in charge of homicide at the Indianapolis Police Department for a lot of years. I was the commander of the homicide branch. And when I was there, we had an 83% clearance rate, which is very, very good for a city our size. But that still means every year, 17% of the cases go unsolved. And I just figure, well, that's what will happen. That's going to happen in this case. Because sometimes some murder cases, you just don't have enough evidence. You simply can't, you played out all the evidence as far as you can play it, and you've investigated everything, and you're just not going to go anywhere. And so I'd say that I might have to put this thing on the shelf. Now, we never deactivate murder cases. We put them on the shelf and leave them there. Now, if new evidence comes along, we can reopen them and go look again. But I just had to put this thing on the shelf. And I said, Bob, there's nothing you can do. Stop thinking about it. That sounds good. But I never did stop thinking about it. But anyway, I finally had to give up. Well, anyway, a few months later, it was getting close to my wife and I's anniversary. And we had both decided we were going to take a trip somewhere. And we wanted to go someplace neither of us had been. So she called me one morning and said, what do you think about New Orleans? I said, okay, sounds like fun. I'd never been to New Orleans. She had either. So we booked a trip for New Orleans for our anniversary. So we went down there. We spent several, well, about 4 or 5 days having a great time down there and everything. Well, the last day is that we had a plane, but our plane didn't leave till the evening. So we had all day. Now we had gone into the French Quarter at nighttime to listen to the bars, listen to the bands, and have some drinks and all that. But I noticed on the way in, there were all kind of really neat shops in the French Quarter, and memorabilia stores, art galleries, antique stores. I said, "Well, we go window shopping in the French Quarter today." So we did that, and we went to a lot of different stores and saw a lot of things. We finally got to Royal Street, and those days in the 1990s, or early 1990s, Royal Street was all art galleries. So we started visiting, walk through the art galleries because they had, and some of them had some really beautiful, beautiful art. We were just looking at all these various paintings, and everything, and we started walking down the street. As we're getting down the street, this shops are getting smaller, and the paintings and painters more obscure. Well, finally, we get to a little shop at the end of the street, and I walk in. It's a 2-story building, and they had said modern art upstairs. My wife's a modern art fan. I never have been, so she went upstairs, and I'm just walking along the hallway and walk along the first floor, just looking at the paintings. And I didn't recognize any of the artists or any of the paintings. I'm just looking and everything. I get to the corner, and there's a portrait on an easel staying in the corner. And I come back and look at it, and it was sudden, like I ran to a glass wall. I stopped suddenly. It was the portrait of the hunchback woman. I was a police officer for 38 years, and there was a lot of situations where I was really scared. I mean, I've had a lot of times where I was really frightened. I have never been as frightened as I was at that moment. And all them years of police work, nothing ever was as frightening as this moment, because things like this doesn't happen in real life. Now, things like this may happen on TV and in movies. They don't happen in real life. Come on, what's the odds of me seeing this during regression, hunting for it for months and months, and just stumbling onto it? And I'm standing looking at this painting, and I'm wondering, am I really here? Am I in a bed somewhere with wires connected to me? And people are trying, I'm about ready to phase out, and I'm ready. People are, crying around me because I'm dying. Am I in a nursing home, in a mental ward, in a nursing home? Have I lost my mind? Because again, things don't happen. Then at first I think, well, maybe this is not it. This looks like it. This is not it. I'm trying to rationalize this, figure some way to explain this. So, but like I said, I closed my eyes, and I could still see the portrait with every brushstroke, and opened my eyes, and it was there. This was the painting. And again, it must have been 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. I'm trying to find some rational explanation as how this could be the painting. Finally, a salesman, I think he saw me look at this with a hot dog. He said, this guy likes this. So he come over and said, I bet you're thinking of nice to look over your fireplace. And I'm just stunned. I come out of it finally. I says, I don't recognize the artist. Who's the artist? Because I didn't see any signature on it. He said, well, come over here. So I have a little bio of him over here. So I went over to his desk, and he pulled out a little piece of paper, and I looked at it. He said that the painter's name was J. Carroll Beckwith. And I read the bio, and I all of a sudden I saw confirmations of things I'd seen during regression. That number one, that there was a painting of the hunchback woman. It wasn't my imagination. And interesting enough, the painter, this Beckwith, had died in 1917. And I remember both my self hypnosis things, I'd seen number 1917. And also, I found that he'd lived during a time period, he'd lived during the late 19th century, and that he had won a number of awards for his paintings. And I remember being at that party where people were congratulating me. So anyway, I wasn't sure what to do now. I mean, I was so flustered, confused. I didn't know what to do, but I knew now that I had information, I could reopen this case. So I thought, well, I get back to Annapolis. Now I got a name, a date of birth, and death, and I know a person who to look into. I could investigate this. I was still pretty sure that I had seen Beckwith's painting somewhere in Annapolis. I had seen an exhibit. I had seen his name. I read a little bio of him there, but had forgotten it, and that's how it come true. So I went back and went to the public library and found out there was very, very little information on Beckwith. Turns out he wasn't that famous a painter. He made his living painting portraits, but he never painted any landmark, any masterpiece paintings. He mainly painted portraits of people, and that was enough money he made enough money to get by on that. But so there wasn't hardly even very much at all. So finally, the lady at the library told me, said, I'll tell you what you need to do. So you need to go up to the art museum library. So they have a much more thorough collection of art history up there than we do. I thought, okay, That's not a good idea. So I left her and I drove up to the north side of Indianapolis where the art museum's at and went to the library. And I told the lady I was looking into the Carroll Beckwith, and I was finding what information they had about him. So she searched around and she found some information that I didn't have from the public library. That again, everything kept confirming what I'd seen. That number one, I told you that I had when I come to this, I passed through the ceiling of the building I was in when I died. I was over a large city, a huge city. Well, he died in New York City. And I'd said I thought it was fall of the year because the leaves still had leaves, brisk, but the trees still had leaves. Well, he died October 24th. Also, it was talking, they said that he hated painted portraits, but he needed the money. I thought, boy, I had said that at least 4 or 5 times to Dr. Griffith, how much I hated painted portraits, but I needed the money. But anyway, she also said, by the way, we have a brochure on exhibition, his work that was held here. And I thought, man, yes, I knew it. I'd seen it. So she brought it over. Unfortunately, it was in 1911. At the moment, I thought, yes, I have solved this. I've solved this. But unfortunately, it was 1911. But anyway, I left there. But one of the interesting thing I found when I was there, one of the little blurbs that she gave me was a footnote. It said this information came from the diaries of James Carroll Beckwith on file at the National Academy of Design, New York City. So I left there and I'd realized I'd already made 10 confirmations of the things I'd seen under the hypnosis. There'd been no contradictions, just 10 of them. So I knew what I needed to do is I called the National Academy of Design in New York and see if I could get access to the diaries. And the guy said, no, we don't. He said, they're much too fragile. We don't want them out. So, however, he said, well, they have been microfilmed and you can get them through the Archives of American Art at Smithsonian, to a library alone. So I did. I said, okay. So I went to the library and asked for get a copy of the microfilm. So the lady said, okay, be about 2 weeks. So, okay. So I went home and what I did, I listened to the audio tape again, and I wrote down everything that could be confirmed, yes or no. What things I'd done. I got, did he drink wine? If now Beck would have been a teetotaler, and I saw him drinking wine, I know this wasn't true. I'll tell you what I was looking for just a moment. I was looking for the one or two denying factor. In other words, 1 or 2 things that were wrong. That wasn't true. Then if you can find them, you realize this is not a real memory. There's something wrong here. This is all jump. For example, I had said we wanted to have children. My wife couldn't have children. Well, if he had 4 kids, then this is not a real memory. That's what I was looking for. So anyway, I found out there were 28 things that I could prove or not prove. So I waited when the diaries got there. Unfortunately, diaries got there. I found that Beckwith was a very avid diary keeper. There were 9 spools of microfilm with 17,000 pages. You thought, oh,
17,000.
17,000 pages. So I thought, what could I do? But also I found that he had written an autobiography. I thought, well, I'll read the autobiography first, okay? But unfortunately, he started the spring of 1917. He only got 23 pages before he died. But for some reason, also someone had excerpted some pages of his diary and typed them. I'm not sure why. And one of them was talking about how when he was going to art school in Paris, excuse me, he had taken the summer off and lived in Venice, and where he lived on wine and burnt eggs. So again, it confirmed one of the things I saw. Also, so what I finally had to do is I finally realized this, and what am I going to do? How are you going to read 17,000 pages? And the bad thing, I only had 2 weeks at the library for these these tapes. And how are you going to do that? How are you going to be able to do it? So I finally decided what I need to do. I need to get somebody else in this. I need to get a third party involved in this, someone who a disinterested third party. So my wife is also a police detective. She was a detective for 27 years there. She was a child abuse detective at the police department. So I thought, well, let me talk to her. Because after this time, she didn't know what I was doing. I had never spoken to her. I hadn't spoken to anybody about this yet. So I told her what I'd found. I sat down with her and everything. She basically thought I was nuts. She basically thought I'd lost my mind. But I tried to explain, no, hang on. I said, look at what I found. Look at all the information. And she basically told me, he said, you know what happened? She said, you have seen this somewhere. You have read it. You see it in a movie. And that's all it is. You regurgitate. Well, I said, I tried to tell her, no, there are no movies about Beckwith. He was nobody. He was not famous, no books. She said, okay, let me do it. I'll find the information about Beckwith. Now, actually, this is what I was hoping for, because I needed a disinterest. One of my biggest admonishments to all my detectives when I was in charge of homicide is don't get personally involved in your cases. If you get personally involved in your cases, you get tunnel vision, you lose the wide view. You cannot get personally involved. And boy, I was really personally involved in this case. I knew I was. Excuse me. And so I was really glad my wife said it. So she took her about a month, but she could find nothing. Nothing else, nothing more than I'd found. Absolutely nothing. But then she still said, I basically it's one of these things. Okay, Bob says, but shut up about it. Said, this is not something Captain Scholes talking about. Shut up about it. So anyway, I decided, well, she may have some, she may be right. She may be right. Maybe I need to just shut up about it. Well, anyway, so I decided I'd go back to my regular job and forget and just let it go. Well, it seemed right. I don't think the universe had that in plan for me, because almost immediately I started running into police officers who had these stories about paranormal events. I found out that later on through a little question that police officers experience quite a number of paranormal events in their life, and almost always when they're under stress. So I talked to several people several police who had talked about out of body experiences, and had some people talk about houses where things are moving on their own. And I had talked to enough officers, I finally decided, now, if they can talk about it, I can talk about it. So what I did, I reordered the microfilm and had it converted to hard copy. And I ended up reading every single page. Every 17,000. I said I read every one, which was a hell of a, it took over a year to do this, because not only was it, at the time, Beckwith had a tendency to write in light pencil, and he scribbled a lot. But anyway, what happened is basically after I went to the diary, I was able to confirm one after another after another. But I kept telling myself, it's each time I get the diary, I'd find something, confirm something. I'm still looking for the one denying factor. But I think what really pushed me over the edge on this is it was when I got to December 5th, 1886, the diary entry. I said that just before my regression was over, I had said she died of a blood clot. Doctor said she died of a blood clot. And I'd felt very, very sad, because it was a woman who was very important to the artist. Now, I knew after reading Beckwith's diary and all the things by him, there had been only two people. It'd be his wife or his mother, probably more. His mother was his dad was a very practical man, and he told him that being an artist was the best way to do it, starving to death. But his mother actually encouraged him in artwork. She actually bought him his first easels and paint and all, and he really loved his mother dearly. Well, on December 5th, 1886, Beckwith writes in his diary that his mother had a stroke in church and died from a blood clot. I think this is the one that probably pushed me over, that I realized I was not going to find the denying factor. I was not going to find that fact that wasn't true. I mean, you can make a guess about a person's life and you could probably get 5 or 6 things right, but you're not going to eventually get all 28 things right. And you're not going to know what a person's mother died of. You're not going to be able to guess that. I think this is actually, eventually I was able to prove all 28 things I'd seen there. Not one thing proved untrue. And again, that's
incredible.
What do I do? What do you do with this thing? Now, what do you do with this information? And I finally decided that, because a number of times I had information about Beckwith literally dumped in my lap, where it just came almost out of nowhere. And I realized that finding the painting was coincidental enough, but all of a sudden you get information about him. For example, in his diary, he talked quite a few times about his scrapbooks. I worked on my scrapbooks. I could not find where they were at. Well, I was talking to a lady who does research on American paintings, and we were talking about Beckwith, and I hadn't asked anything about it. She said, all out of nowhere, she said, by the way, his scrapbooks are at the New York Historical Society, right? And I didn't. So I went there, and I went to New York, and I actually looked at the scrapbooks. But like this, I'd have information about Beckwith dumped in my lap. And I had to realize that all this stuff was too coincidental to be coincidence. And so I felt the only thing I really did need to write this book. And I did. Now, the outcome, police department did not like it. Police department did not take kindly to this. This is, as my wife had warned, the police department was not happy. They didn't want one of their command staff espousing this sort of thing, because police work is a very conservative profession, and they were not real happy about me espousing reincarnation in a book. But again, I felt this was just, I had too much information. This was too important to keep to myself.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, it eventually ended my career at the police department, you know, but it's one of those things you have to give something. I mean, this information came to me. It needs to go out. You have to take the consequences of whatever happens. And that's basically my story.
That's just amazing. So let me recap for people. Gregg, if you just go back for 1 sec to the last slide. Highly encourage anybody who's interested in this story, because Bob Snow has been on the Katie Couric show. He's been on Coast to Coast. He's really had some wonderful places to share this story. So I'm just so appreciative that he's here with us today. So the recap of Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, the book, the true story of a police detective's reincarnation, is a veteran police detective, Robert Snow, was devoted to evidence and hard facts, as you certainly heard in this recap, never given any thought to reincarnation. But during a hypnotic regression, he experiences a vivid awareness of being alive in 3 separate historical scenes. Remaining skeptical, Snow begins to investigate with the intention of disproving reincarnation. Very understandable. Instead, his diligent research and corroboration from multiple sources reveal solid evidence that he lived a former life as Carroll Beckwith, a 19th-century American artist. So Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic tells the fascinating story of Bob Snow's transformation from skeptic to believer. So Gregg, do you have questions? Because I sure do.
Well, yeah, I have something real quick I wanted to show. So while Bob was talking, I found the portrait.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to share that now. And why is it not?
And while Gregg's looking for that, Bob, do you have any art talent, any creative talent, or do you
No.
feel like you're like totally
Well,
opposite?
I
in
don't
this
know. People,
lifetime?
I guess being a writer has some kind of talent.
It's a
But
creative talent. Yes.
artistically, no, not at all.
Okay.
But again,
Okay.
you think, why would you need to? You lived that life. Why would you want to do it
Right.
again? Why would you want to do it again if you've already lived that life?
Right. Because I just was struck by how you were describing like the vividness of the strokes and being able to remember the painting, and even being involved enough with it that you were upset that they didn't light your paintings properly for a show, and that really bugged you.
It's kind of funny because I've said, so when I went through his scrapbooks, I found that he basically what his scrapbooks were is various articles about him from around the world, and there were like 10 articles in there about a incident he had at a club in New York City that was displaying his paintings, where he got so angry about the lighting being bad, they took the painting off the wall and carried it home with him.
I mean, that's just more real than real, as you
Yeah.
said. And oh my gosh.
Yeah,
So
this is kind of a scary shot,
I'm
actually.
not, yeah, now, truthfully, I'm not sure where that came from. That's not the painting, by the way.
Oh, it's not?
No, I don't. I
Oh.
have no idea where this came from.
Oh,
No,
all right.
it's not the painting. No.
okay.
I'm not
Okay.
sure if somebody somebody just found a picture of Hunchback Woman, put it in.
All
there.
right. Well,
That's not the real painting. No.
Okay, I'm glad you said that, because I did a
Actually,
search.
I have seen that online. I'm not
Yeah.
sure where. I'm not sure where it comes.
Well, now,
It's just it's a misidentification.
yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
But yeah, so sorry
Fair
about that.
enough.
But yeah, yes, the question I have, Bob, is did you ever go back and do more regression?
Well, I did the one again when I was trying to find out about Beckwith before I knew his name and everything. I did do it, and I went to some interesting lives, but never back to Beckwith. And now would be much point, because I have read all 17,000 pages of his diary and everything ever written about him. So how would you know if anything you experienced was true or just part of this memories?
Yeah.
The point
Right.
when I went through the first time, not knowing anything about Beckwith, to me adds more validity to the things I saw. Whereas now I know an awful lot about him. I mean, reading
Yeah.
a person's diary, this is the person's innermost thoughts and desires and various things about each day. So you'd always kind of wonder, well, is this really true, or is it something you got from his diary you're bringing back up?
Right, right. No, what I meant was, did you find any other lives, or did you investigate any other lives besides Beckwith afterwards?
My problem was, again, all my lives other than Beckwith were so far back in history that there's no way to verify them. There really isn't. Fortunately, Beckwith was around at a time when there were still there were being records kept. For example, I got a copy of his death certificate. I got a copy of his diary and his autobiography and all this kind of thing. Whereas the other lives I lived were like one of my experiences was a monk in like the 15th century. Now, you might be able to find that person's name, but does that really mean anything? Unless it was a very, very unusual name, what does that really mean? Because interesting enough, I had the idea after Beckwith came out of investigating other people's regressions.
Oh, cool.
And thinking, well, I could do that. But you find very few people, most people have regressions are not nearly as clear as mine. I didn't realize I had what you call a full sensory regression.
I was going to say, you had very much a multi-sensory, because you're not only seeing, you're hearing, you're smelling,
I could taste, smell, hear, where other people's most regressions I was able to get a hold of were very, very blurry, very, one of my guys, he was telling me he's a farmer in Iowa in 1800s named John. Okay, that was most he got out of the whole regression. I mean, right. I'm sure if I investigate, I could find an 1800 guy named John, but what would that prove?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd be able to get the proof. I found out get proof for regression is really tough, because most people's, again, is not as nearly. I had no idea, because Dr. Griffith, after the book came out, got a whole lot of several dozen people come to her wanting a regression, and she said most of them were kind of disappointed because they were expecting a full sensory regression too, and they didn't. Again, most people's past life regressions are not nearly as clear and don't really give as much information, apparently.
That had more to do with you than the practitioner, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know.
Bob, I have a question. I don't know if you can recall this from 1992, but once you had the first regression and before you found anything through researching, that period where it just wouldn't leave you alone, it just kept coming up again and again. It was just like a puzzle that had to be put together. Did you find like pieces, like more memories coming to you? Like, would you wake up dreaming about it and go, oh, now I remember this? Did it like fill itself in at all? Do you recall?
Not a bit. And the funny thing is, during the time I was investigating all this, I had all kind of tons of little bizarre coincidences happen about me and Beckwith. Just had them happen. God, it got silly at the last. So many of these little bizarre coincidences happen. Once the book was published, it stopped. I haven't had a single one since. That makes me think I did my job. That this is what I was supposed to do. Yeah, I did what I was supposed to do.
The energy was released. Yeah. So you did. My belief is a belief is our souls can have some very interesting plans for our lives that we, of course, don't know about, don't remember because of that veil of amnesia. And, you come in because you need the fresh start.
Yeah.
But then when things just keep falling in your lap like that, because the fact that you had the investigative skills pre-internet days and just so much detail came in, and the fact that you were a writer, that's an unusual combination.
Yeah, I've often thought about that. I agree with you. I think this was the destined. This is the way things. Come on, the chances of finding that painting. Come on, that is so cool. That police officers don't believe in coincidences anyway, because we so often find that coincidences we see in our investigative work are not really coincidences. They're things made to happen to look like coincidences. But again, I thought about that. Well, how's that apply to this case of finding the painting? Who would make this coincidence happen? That's kind of a scary thought too. Mm-hmm. But again, so many things happen. And like you said, I was an investigator. I was a writer. It's kind of like it's kind of like a destiny thing. This was meant to happen. Yes,
it's tailor-made.
Yes,
absolutely.
It's just perfect. And I do want people to be comfortable. Bob illustrated it really well. You're merely given hypnotic suggestions, but you have free will. And it is very important. Don't try and please your therapist. Don't try and please someone else. Follow your intuition, follow your gut. because your soul knows and you've got that wisdom. So even though he's directed to go somewhere, he's like, oh, but wait a minute, I need more time. This is like the moment of my life. I need more time to just, feel that joy and that enjoyment of that pinnacle of you were getting that award and just feeling the love from people. It's a big deal.
So I think too many people see these TV programs or movies where the hypnotist makes you cluck like a chicken or do silly things, and when you're in hypnosis, they don't have that kind of control.
Correct.
You're in control yourself. You really are.
Exactly. You can stop it at any
You can
time, just like your tape recorder,
Yeah.
kind of startled you out of that. You're
Right.
simply in a relaxed state. People who meditate or chant or have other spiritual practices, we simply runners who know, runner's high. We just
Mm.
simply know how to put ourselves in the zone where you're just balancing up your energy. You're nice and grounded. You're really relaxed. That's all it is. So it's a very useful, it's a very healing, calming place to be.
We are at the end of the hour, and we want
All
to
right.
thank Bob so much. Fascinating story, Bob.
Well, thank you for having me on.
And we'd like to, Wendy, do you want to take over?
Absolutely. Yes. So thank you to everyone for being here, to Bob especially, and Gregg for pushing all the right buttons. Please join us July 10th for the next Waking Up Spiritually podcast. We'd love suggestions. Where are you struggling? Where do you have big questions? Please let us know, and would love to help. Join our Facebook group, Waking Up Spiritually. Visit our website, wakingupspiritually.com. You can click on the broadcast tab, and there Gregg has carefully archived and given just descriptions of the various programs, because you'll find tips and techniques there. You'll find guided meditations, things to help you. Because when your worldview falls away like this, like all three of us have experienced, it can be very disconcerting. So we'd like to just help you, get grounded and clear with that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. The link is included here. Please rate and review us on Apple iTunes or whatever your favorite podcast app is. That would be so appreciated. We're on Apple iTunes as Waking Up Spiritually. And visit Gregg at his website, Gregg, Kirk, KIRK.com. And sessions with Gregg are wonderful. I call them my spiritual ER, because what can be accomplished in a half an hour via phone appointment can be pretty amazing, or the other programs that he mentioned. And visit me at wendyrosewilliams.com. And my apologies, I've been out of touch with people for so long, between a move and just a total technical redo that was needed of my business. But I am back to work, and you will be hearing from me as I get all my systems reinvented and back up and running. So thank you so much for being here. We really, really enjoy and appreciate you joining us. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Gregg.
Thank you.